Spoken about Jacob, I'll say in Natty too, our eldest is 24. I think storytelling's been a big part of his life. He's a screenwriter. And one day when we were 6 or 7, we were walking on St. Clair Avenue West, and he saw how many different kinds of people were out on the boulevard and how many different kinds of cafes there were. And he said, you know, Daddy, there's Little Italy and Little India and Chinatown. Our neighborhood is World Town. And I think this is a storyteller's interest too, to look at where you are, to pay attention to what's around you, to want to celebrate your own place, your own neighborhood. And he now writes movies about Toronto. In fact, we're writing one together called Lost Rivers of Toronto. It's a comedy. It's a comedy about the male lead builds film facades to make Toronto look like Chicago. And the girl he falls in love with leads Lost Rivers walks. They meet on the Don where he goes fishing. And if there are any executive producers here, we're looking for one. I've mentioned that the love of oral language is hardwired into the storyteller's soul. And something else we take a professional interest in is what could be called social decorum, how people act in communal situations. See, storytellers have always paid attention to the unspoken rules, the customs, the thought ways that make society work. There's a nice Chinese proverb that says, go outside, look at the sky. Go inside, look at people. That is, look closely at how people accomplish the daily task of recreating and sustaining civilization. Which brings me, and now you guys are thinking, this talk is already strange enough, it's going to get even stranger. This is one of my pet peeves. How many of you have noticed that the very underpinnings of civilized life as we know it are being dismantled by the shocking fact that people now yawn without covering their mouths? Don't gasp in disbelief, this is a fact. I have witnessed it all over the place. I've been at meetings when I worked at the city, at Toronto Arts Council. I'd go to meetings at the culture division, and people shout, oh. In fact, if you even saying the word yawn, you go ahead, do it. You're going to yawn during my talk. This is guaranteed. Not because it's so boring, I hope. Just because if you say the word yawn, people automatically yawn. Ready? 1, 2, 3, yawn. Okay. I'm on a campaign to end this trend immediately before it goes too far. I know I've already lost the battle. I'm going down fighting. I first noticed it when my friend Kevin McKenzie, a storyteller from Regina, was sitting on our couch one summer afternoon, and when he yawned, now this is the culture-shifting moment for me, he didn't lift his hand to cover his mouth. Couldn't believe it. He didn't even make that sketchy little gesture, sort of passing, superficial little, that we sometimes use when a yawn comes a bit too fast. He just yawned a big, innocent, jaw-cracking yawn, looking like nothing so much as a sleepy baby wearing a t-shirt, jeans, and weighing 190 pounds. He was apparently oblivious to the fact that he had just wrecked thousands of years of carefully learned social decorum. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to say, dude, who raised you? Were you brought up in a bar? But it would have been a lost cause, and now I realize that my friend was just the first one. He was the bellwether. And this flock is growing faster than purple loosestrife. Because since Kevin's breakthrough, everywhere you go, you'll see your fellow citizens, especially the younger ones, yawning these huge, mouth agape yawns, jaw stretchers, without the slightest attempt to cover their mouths. I'm not making this up. I wonder now, is it a generational thing where the customs old people prize get ignored by the young? And Kevin is younger than me by about 20 years. And it is true you don't see many 61-year-olds yawning without covering their mouths in public places. Anyway, I mean, when I ride my bike to work, I go down Bathurst Street. If I'm yawning, I'm riding my bike. Even then I try to cover my mouth. Like for who? The streetcar going by? I don't know, but I still do it. It's a reflex. So I wonder if I'm becoming a curmudgeon. I know I'm becoming a curmudgeon. But I have to say in my defense that as a storyteller, I have a professional interest in building community and resisting the more demoralizing forces of modern life. I even have a poster from the ROM in my office, and it's a photograph of an Inuit carving of a hand grasping an ulawan. Is that how you say it? I think ulawan, the scraping tool. And it says, the subtitle says, grasp tight the old ways. But I am not nostalgic for some good old and better mannered days. I never believed, for example, that watching Bugs Bunny or Roadrunner cartoons turned children into serial killers. And I might be the only 61-year-old who actually enjoys hearing kids use the word like in their everyday storytelling. I find it like subversive. A generation raised in front of screens, that is, in front of likenesses, now frames their stories with the ubiquitous like, as if to say what follows in my narrative is a likeness of life. A narrative close-up, or a pan shot, or a cutaway, something realish, but not quite real. All that TV, video, computer watching has given them the right to put the rhythms of a camera into their tongues, into their oral language. I like it. I'm not a total obstructionist. It's just that this gape-mouthed yawning does drive me crazy. And I consider the uninhibited yawn an epidemic, this epidemic a sign of the de-civilization of society. But here's the question. How did a custom so rooted in centuries of everyday politesse erode so quickly? And why do we, mouth-covering yawners, the few of us still left, feel so strongly about hiding a perfectly natural physical phenomenon? I mean, I have to, see, again, don't sit next to me at a cafe, and if you do, and you yawn and you don't cover your mouth, I'm sitting there, I'm really suppressing this vigilante tendency. I really want to go over and cover your mouth. So why does it matter? Well, when I see you yawn, I can't keep myself from joining you. You've cast a spell on me. Or at least your hardwired nervous and respiratory systems have activated some kind of ancient response in mine, probably inherited from the days when we ran together in a pack. On Wikipedia, you can discover that many theories abound as to the physical and social causes of yawning. Some say it cools the brain. Others that it balances pressure in our ears. And others, again, that it prevents alveolar collapse in the lungs. The contagious aspect of yawning, and did you know that this works across species? You can make your dog yawn if you yawn right in its face. I don't know why you would want to. Is a mystery. Some studies describe it as evidence of empathy. Others as part of a herd's way to agree on common rest periods. You know, everyone has to go to nap together, otherwise one of them might eat you. But what's certain is that there's a profoundly communal experience, so much so that you've all been struggling with an urgent need to yawn every time I even just say the word yawn. I think covering our mouths is a sign that we're refusing to work this strange biosocial magic on those around us. With a small gesture, we put a limit, however slightly and briefly, on the deep and powerful and involuntary forces that cause us to act like pack animals. Blasting an unprotected yawn out into public space puts us all back into collective moon-howling, nit-searching herd mode. We're better than that, Kevin. This superficial courtesy is a little way to demonstrate that deeper social truth. So listen, Kevin McKenzie, and anybody out here who's, wavering and hasn't fully decided, hasn't committed. It's time to grow up. The world needs more grown-ups. Learn to control yourself. Grasp tight the old ways. I told you I'm just going to get strange. Now, I wanted to talk there. We just have time for a couple more little of these personal anecdotes, and then we're going to end this part with a story that Brian and Jim will help tell. I want to talk about a project I did about 17 years ago in response to a story I read in the newspaper. And some people in this room were part of that project, and in fact, Alec came every single night of it. To set the scene, I have to mention that one of the great pioneers of the storytelling movement, it was the late Dr. Hugh Morgan Hill, also known as Brother Blue. I once heard someone ask him how he became this exuberantly dressed, bebopping storyteller, African-American storyteller, performing in prisons, public parks, and anywhere people would gather to listen to his breathtaking stories. And Blue answered something like this. He said, "The reason I put on my bells and my butterflies, my ribbons and balloons is that one day I might be walking down the street, and there's a man in a house who wants to die, and he looks outside and sees this crazy one-man carnival going by, and he says to himself, 'Man, I thought I had it bad.' And he decides not to kill himself. He said, 'I tell stories to keep people from committing suicide.' Storytelling is an antidote to suicide. And this is, I think, a belief and a passion our beloved Alec Gelser would have endorsed, and one that he lived by too. Storytelling for them was an act of service as much as an art. And I remembered Blue's comment many years ago when I was trying something I'd never done before. In the middle of a wakeful night, I started to wonder what it would be like to tell a completely fresh, new story woven from the moment. I had done this with my kids sometimes, but didn't work out too well, because usually I'd be so tired, when I tried, I'd fall asleep halfway through the story. You ever try to make up a story for your kid? Sometimes I'd be nodding off and I'd hear a little voice say, "Daddy, how did the horse get into the stars again?" But as Yeats wrote, there is always the fascination of what's difficult, and I knew in my gut that one day I would have to try this with an audience. I've always loved the camp counselor in J.D. Salinger's story, The Laughing Man. Every afternoon he improvised a story for his boys, all about a great detective known as the Laughing Man. Anybody know that story? Run out and buy it. It's in the book called 9 Stories. It's a fantastic story about storytelling. And every day this camp counselor would tell us a story. The idea of being able to weave a story on the spot. I admire people in books and in real life who can do this, but I had never tried it. My discipline, which was learned from children's librarians like Alice Kane and tradition-loving masters like Joan Bodger, is based on learning a text well and telling it to others. And sometimes it's one I've written or adapted, sometimes it's one I've learned from another teller or from a book, but there's always a set of words I have to get right to be able to tell a story. What would it be like to make it up on the spot? And what kind of listener might enjoy a new, fresh, never-told-before story? And at that point, Blue's philosophy of storytelling came to mind, and I started to think that a listener in need of a new story would be someone who had stopped hearing his own stories. Someone who was no longer wondering what was going to happen next. This person might need a new tale to open their ears, especially if it felt like it was being told just for them. Which brought me to the article I had read in the paper. Many years ago, I read a terrible news story in the Globe and Mail. A young man had jumped in front of a subway train here in Toronto, and his father, on his way to the city morgue to identify the body, came to the Rosedale Bridge and leapt to his death on the tracks below. This tragic city story had haunted me for years, and I decided that my new story would be dedicated to the son and his father. I would try to make up the kind of story that might have kept the young man from killing himself and might posthumously commemorate the father's grief-stricken deed. And I called the story The Toronto Book of the Dead. Because I would be improvising the tale, I called the process Shahara Jazz. And the next day I put up flyers throughout the annex, and it said, "I am hunting, gathering a new story. It will be told in memory of a citizen who was too late to save the life of someone he loved." For 7 Tuesday nights, I, with members of the 7 different audiences, and again, there's some people here who are there, I don't know if anybody's still in the room, but anyway, Harriet came almost every night, Celia was here a lot, often including Alec, created a story. And there were many stories told over those 7 nights, and we were creating them in memory of the father and son. It was a kind of citizen's vigil, an observance more than a performance, an honoring of whatever unimaginable pain drove this pair to their respective suicides. On the first night, I said that we were creating a 7-week, 7-chapter medicine bundle of stories. The theory is that nobody would kill himself if he were listening to the right story, if he were still waiting to hear what happened next. Nobody would choose to leave the room or the world if he were in suspense about the hero's fate, especially if he knew that the story was about himself. So the Toronto Book of the Dead was spoken and written. And Ellie, I got a bit more time? We're not finished? Okay. You guys are good?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You have me worried there. I know you're not used to hearing, it's like bedtime storytelling. It's got to have me worried when I thought, I'm going to be reading aloud and they're all going to fall asleep. It's going to look like bedtime. We met in a small back room at the now gone Café Vérité on Bloor Street, downtown. And somebody one day should write a history of small back rooms in cafes where no table leg is the same length as any other, and where teenagers come to drink strong black coffee and discuss philosophy, because many things are incubated there, including storytelling. I had a few props. I had a golden feather, which was passed from teller to teller, and then there were rappers and fiddlers and ballad singers and even a soprano who came, and a gamelan chime, and a little puppet, Granny, 1 foot high, who had a red shawl and spoke with Yiddish accent. She was like the Greek chorus. The audience varied from week to week. And so there were many different things that were said, all of it improvised. And sometimes people told traditional stories too. We did not speculate about the psychology of either the father or the son. The young, unfortunately, find many reasons to kill themselves these days, and his story can be found every day in the papers or the late-night news. But the father's act transforms the story into a Greek tragedy. Their deeds invite our notice, but like in the ancient plays, there's no psychology at all. The deeds themselves invite our notice, but resist our interpretation. I don't even remember the names I'd read in the original article, although I do remember Rosedale Bridge. And because it's Rosedale, I started to think of it as a middle or an upper class tragedy. I had never improvised a story before, and though this was a big challenge, and one night I said, this just came to me, I said, you know, you never commit suicide in your dreams. So I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, so it's just a gut feeling. But I think it's true. Because in a dream, any self-hate or any depression or any self-doubt turns into an external monster, turns into the SS or a beast chasing you or a wolf or falling off a cliff. But you don't have to kill yourself in your dreams. And so one day in the Toronto Book of the Dead, I said, that night, I said, what do you think the young man dreamed about the night before he kills himself? Because that was the last moment when he was open to life, open to a new story. And that night we made up the dreams he might have had that night. And on another one, Granny spoke up, and this is what she said. She said, so, you're always saying they jump to their death. What about jumping to your life for a change? So my puppet was smart, you see. What does it mean to jump to your life? Well, of course, skipping. No one's ever skipped to their death. And so that night we thought of all the skipping rhymes we could remember, and Celia Lottridge, one of our great storytellers and writers, remembered this one. Little Minnie Ha-Ha went to see her papa. Papa died, Minnie cried. Minnie had a baby and she called him Uncle Tim, and she put him in a bathtub to teach him how to swim. He drank up all the water and he ate up all the soap, and he died last night with a bubble in his throat. In came the doctor, in came the nurse. In came the lady with the alligator reverse. Dead, said the doctor, dead, said the nurse, dead, said the lady with the cheerful, right? This rhyme launched a 3-week story about the life and times of Minnie Ha-Ha, a woman who never lost her ability to laugh. So, at the end of the 7 weeks, we decided that the son had jumped because he had run out of stories, and the father died because he had run out of sons. And that's how we remembered them. There's more to say, and there always is, but I want to move on to the story part. I wanted to just mention one last thing. Ellie, how much time have I got? 10 more minutes? African time, Jewish time, or Canadian time? I was at the Jewish Community Center once working out. I'm not a runner, I'm a swimmer, but I was running on the track that day. And I wanted to read you a little poem and then tell the last story of the session. And also mention I was in Israel about 1.5 years ago, and I also went to Ramallah. I have a Palestinian friend, and all my Israeli friends and family, they said, first of all, you're going to Ramallah? This was surprising to them. And also, you have a friend in Ramallah? And this is a wonderful Palestinian storyteller. And we had a great time. I went to visit. And it certainly made me reflect a lot on what does it mean. Stories do not have, no checkpoints can keep stories out. That's what I really realized. And that when stories pass between friends or cross borders, they have a certain power. I'm not saying they bring peace or resolution to any politics whatsoever, but sometimes it's the least you can do. And as storytellers, in some ways, it's the most we can do. But anyway, this is a little poem about, I guess, what it means to me to be a Jewish storyteller. And it's a poem called God is Yelling at the Children of Israel. You have to picture me, of all people. I'm not much of a runner, but I'm running around the track. Tuesday afternoon in a Toronto gym, and God is yelling, again, at the children of Israel. God, a grade 1 teacher here at the Jewish Community Center, has reached his limit. Isaiah, you can sit out until you learn to share the ball. Isaiah stomps over to the corner and the game goes on. By rules I can't discern from the running track above, squeals of 6-year-old glee ricocheting off the high roof as the people of the book become the people of the game. Young Sarahs, Jacobs, Leahs, and Isaacs chase the ball in a rush of confused competition, high spirits, uncertain rules. Isaiah returns to the fray temporarily contrite, promising God not to boss around his playmates. I love this game, shouts one. I hate this game, cries another, refusing to play. Such imperfect followers of rules, such imperfect followers of rules, such exuberant improvisers, so exasperating, so beautiful. You can tell why Isaiah became so bossy, and God, now withdrawn to the side of the gym, looks discouraged, puzzled, or just exhausted with his rambunctious kids, as if he'd rather be reading a Russian novel or doing Sudoku. Luckily, another adult voice is heard, a woman with an Israeli accent. Another teacher, perhaps, who marshals the scattered group, lays down the rules, apparently there are some, shouts them through the game, and then marches the giggling, arguing, protesting mini-tribe back to the young man on the sidelines who, godlike, has again grounded the diminutive Isaiah for the 2nd or 10th time that day. He leads them, no real lineups for this unruly and opinionated crowd of grade 1s, to the gym door and back to class. I'm on the track above, jogging like an aging angel with sore knees, who, lacking Isaiah's fire, God's resignation, and the Israelis' command, chooses to float in circles above the clamor, reveling in the early, bright, and irresistible voices of my people.